Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is a black Hexer build at rune level 139. Lately I've found I'm just not super pleased with the builds that I'm making at higher rune levels, which is a little bit odd because there's so many incantations and sorceries at really high rune levels that do insane things, and you'd think that like I might enjoy that a little bit more, but I'm just not having the best time making super high rune level mages. I know other people excel at that. I've watched quite a bit of Stevie, but I don't know, might not just be for me. This is going to be a little bit more of an off-the-cuff video because I just don't have a ton to say about this build. But this is a black Hexer. The entire premise of this build is that I'm going to be using stuff that's black. It's crazy, I know. But there's a lot of stuff that's black. What does black symbolize in this game? I'm gonna blow your mind right here. Black symbolizes death. FromSoft just like living in the complete literary future. Nobody has ever like associated the color black with death before. That's insane, dude. But that is kind of what's happening in Elden Ring. After a series where they did a lot of subversive stuff with like the idea and the concept of dark, Elden Ring just goes to like, yeah, black equals death. Stuff that's dead, kind of black, and it's also a little bit white too. So stuff that's associated with death, we got Ghost Flame, we have Putrescence, which just seems like a different, slightly darker, bluer flavor of Ghost Flame, and then we also have the Godskin's Black Flame, which is supposed to be this like god-killing flame as well. So I'm trying to use all of that at once. I'm using the Staff of the Great Beyond because that's like my multicasting tool, and I'm just casting like some of the Godskin incantations, pretty much all of the Putrescence incantations, and a few Ghost Flame incantations, mostly Ancient Death Rancor. But really the best Ghost Flame incantation or spell or whatever is the Death's Poker Ash of War. This thing just melts people at rune level 139. I've made another like, I think it was a Deathrite Shaman was the original build that I made that also uses Death's Poker, and lo and behold, I am crutching on the Death's Poker once again. So the big reason I'm kind of down on this build is because it kind of requires you to play very passively. Nothing it sets up is really super aggressive. Maybe Ancient Death Rancor is, but then to follow it up, I have nothing that's super aggressive either. The bigger problems here is that a lot of my spells take up a lot of FP, and I have a decent amount of FP. I think I have between 25 and 30, which is plenty in this game. But then all of the cast times are also pretty slow. So I find myself like kind of on my heels, trying to get some space to cast my spells. And then even then I can get off like, 4 to 5 spells before I have to start already thinking about taking a sip from the blue flask. The other part of this is that you'll see me do this a ton, which is that I set everything up with the Death's Poker L2, just to at least like put something out there. That requires a little bit of space. I know there's a little bit of hyper armor on it, but not a lot. So that's kind of what I find a little bit annoying about this build, is that just you can't play it very aggressively if you're going to use the Death's Poker, which is like the most hexy weapon in the game. I really wanted to make a Hexer. I was playing a lot of Hades 2 when I made this build, and like the main character and her, I guess her trainer are like both like hexing witches. So I tried to emulate that in the fashion, which I think I did pretty well. It's just making this build play aggressively, which I'm struggling with. I think if I remade this build at like rune level 94, or maybe even like rune level 60 with 2 Source Seals, I think I could get this to work. But my hang up is that all of my incantations and spells all cost a lot of FP, so that might be a struggle. I don't mean to be too negative with this build. There are a lot of things about it that I like a lot. I like the color scheme of everything. I wish something like Impenetrable Thorns did a little bit more damage or was a little bit more interesting, because that fits the overall theme of this build really well. The main thing that I like about this build is like this 3 spell combo that is Miriam's Vanishing, Vortex of Putrescence, right into Adula's Moonblade. That typically hits for 1800 damage, which is almost always good enough to kill your opponents dead. It's a fairly reliable combo if you can hit them with the Vortex of Putrescence, because I think that just little bit of hit stun times it up perfectly to hit them with Adula's Moonblade, and if you hit them with the blade itself, that does even more damage. And then the frost properties of Adula's Moonblade usually proc frost, which is like all kind of builds up to that big death combo. So that's a lot of fun. I was trying to use Miriam's Vanishing to be a little bit more aggressive, so I could like teleport towards them, cast the Vortex, and then catch them in it. So that's been pretty fun, but if they can avoid that, this build's a little fucked. Like, if they can get out of my super death combo, I kind of like got nothing else, which is a fatal flaw of this build. The other thing I've discovered while playing with this build is Fleeting Microcosm and like all of its weird, unique properties. I think there's some good spell combos you could make from this build. I just need to like put together the right build to properly get the most out of Fleeting Microcosm. The biggest hang up right now is that I usually like hold it for too long and then get stunned out of casting it. What I'd really like to do is cast it quickly at my feet, so it has that first initial wave as people are trying to roll away, and then maybe I could cast something else to try to catch their second roll as they're desperately trying to get out of the big explosion that Fleeting Microcosm does. But it's a really cool spell. I just need to like play around with it a little bit more. I had some good success with it against people who love spamming Ashes of War because they lock themselves into place while doing that. As I'm looking back at this footage, there's a really good Celian space build in here that I need to make that unfortunately I think would end up probably just being a Dex int build, which I already have at rune level 81. It's one of my favorite builds. In probably the next video after this, you're going to be seeing a lot of that build. You've also seen quite a bit of this build before if you've been watching this channel for a while. But I don't know, there's something about Dex int in this game that just has only advantages, but we'll see. Unfortunately, this is kind of it. I don't have much else to say about this build. I guess my only other thing here is that I've come full circle on the idea that this game needs a Faith int scaling infusion. I think it really does. Builds like this end up being really limited to like one weapon that has a really good Ash of War. Which you can say about a lot of builds, but like my weapons really don't do very good damage at all, and I'm at rune level like 139. I know Death's Poker scales more from dexterity than intelligence, which is insane to me because the Ash of War scales like purely with intelligence and scales like absurdly well with intelligence. But I guess I'm just like frustrated that like they put in all these really interesting int faith spells in the DLC, and then we're like, yep, that's the only way you're going to be able to get real damage towards the end of the game is either Ashes of War or spells. Regular R1s, R2s, just not gonna do it. Which is odd because if you're fighting bosses in like PvE, you need your R2s to stagger bosses for the most part. At least like that's how I always play. Like that's the more fun way to play is like stance breaking bosses with counter hits or R2s. And I guess they're kind of saying if you're an int faith mage, you're just not going to be able to do that, which is a little bit odd. Trying not to be too negative about Elden Ring, but there's like, it feels like there's a lot of stuff they just kind of added because they're like, this would be sick, and they're like, all right, but how does that fit into like the overall like structure of how you make a build in this game? Seems like they didn't consider a lot of these things. I think they just kind of were like, oh shit, we have all these cool ideas. And believe me, I'm not going to complain about Vortex of Putrescence. What a sick spell that is. Please give that to us again in like a later game. But I guess every time I play Elden Ring, especially at higher levels towards the end game, I'm always just left with this like giant want for cohesion. Just like so many things don't tie together in a way that like their smaller games tend to tie together. When you make a build for Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Demon Souls, by like rune level, 60, 60 to 70, you're starting to like concentrate on your build, and by rune level 90, you've like fully realized your build, and it's cohesive, it has advantages, it has drawbacks, and then it's finished. I don't know why I included Dark Souls 2 in that discussion. Dark Souls 2 is much more like this. Dark Souls 2's build making doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It's just so well balanced that it doesn't really matter. Elden Ring has that kind of same ethos where it's like every build needs to be like rune level 150 to 200, but it doesn't have that kind of balance, or I would say like real thought put into how this is going to be fun, that like even a game like Dark Souls 2 that was heavily rushed seems to have. And I think that's just a consequence of Elden Ring being like just such a large game to begin with, and then adding a massive like game-sized DLC onto it also like expanded on that lack of cohesion. Anyways, I've been rambling about like something totally unrelated to like this build for the last like 2 minutes or so. So I'll just leave it here. I will say keep your eyes peeled for a bigger video in the next couple of weeks. I have a lot to talk about. I haven't really talked about Duskbloods. I haven't really talked that much about Night Rain. I did make a video, but at this current moment, I can't really remember what the hell I said, so I should probably go back and review that before I finish the script on this next very large build. Anyways, as you can probably tell, I'm a huge mess these days. I'm super busy, but that hasn't really prevented me from continuing on with the Age of Mage, which will continue for as long as we are playing Elden Ring. But anyways, that's all for me, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.